Fucking-tastic. And welcome to the newest episode of Welcome to the New You, the podcast produced and created and operated by, drumroll please, the Gainesville Community Center. That was too loud. Unnecessary.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I got excited.
You probably scared the people off who were watching. Anyway.
This is just a good intro into what they're in for. So.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. My name's Larry Green. I am the host of the most famous podcast in the office. And I'm also the executive director for the Gainesville Community Counseling Center. I do counseling myself. And I also take out the trash occasionally. Anyway, the Gainesville Community Counseling Center is a 501c3 nonprofit which provides individual couples, families, and group therapy for any and all conditions that you can imagine. Well, not all, but most.
Most.
It's not your turn to talk yet.
Sorry.
Thank you. We are located at 1001 Northeast 16th Avenue in Gainesville, Florida. You can find us online at www.gainesvillecounselingcenter.com. What's that web address? Now you can talk.
www.gainesvillecounselingcenter.com.
That's very good.
That was right?
That was correct. And you can reach us at 352-448-9120. So our podcast, because we are mental health, focuses on issues related to mental health. So depression, anxiety, bipolar, meditation, mindfulness, sex therapy, all good topics. So you're welcome to send us questions, and you can find that link on our YouTube video down there. So feel free to send us questions. So today, our guest is one of our therapists. His name is Conor Mitchell, right?
Hi.
Yeah. Okay. And we'll introduce more about him in just a few minutes. You all right over there, Conor?
I'm great.
He's very nervous to be on here today. I don't know why. So let's just go to starting him up. So Conor, tell a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm a registered mental health counseling intern here. Taken a long circuitous path into becoming a therapist, but here I am.
Circuitous? What the hell is that?
Well, so I was an English major in undergrad.
Oh, so you know big words.
Sometimes big words, even if I don't necessarily use them properly. And comparative religions as well. That gives you a little bit of an idea of what my early interests were. Some of that continues in my therapeutic practice. Certainly, meaning making overall, right? Issues around spirituality. I got tagged as the classic existentialist, although I don't think that that's quite right. I'm more of an essentialist, but maybe that's...
What's the difference?
Well, so existentialism, particularly from a therapeutic perspective and a philosophical perspective, is based around anxiety, right? And knowledge of the fear of death, and sometimes the lack of inherent meaning. And so then the focus becomes on how we create meaning. And while I do think that we can create meaning, I also am a firm believer that there is something inherent in us. There is something core and central. We have an essential nature, and that gets expressed or sometimes not so expressed, depending on what's happening with us.
Which is why they come here.
Which is hopefully why they come here.
Yes. Okay.
But existential questions and existential concerns would still certainly be accurate to my practice. Like I said, spirituality, quite a bit of meditation and mindfulness, some somatic practice, some body-centered practice.
Is that what somatic means?
Somatic.
You use
in
big
the
words
body.
that I don't understand.
That's great. You and I are paired together very well.
Ebony and Continue.
As well as addiction and recovery, trauma focus. I have a tendency to view things through the lens of trauma. Gender issues, do a lot of men's work, although not exclusive to that particular gender. I think that's enough for now.
You're not in control.
Well, it doesn't encapsulate the totality of my being, but I think it's for dipping our toes in.
Okay, and talk about your little tattoos. You're the only therapist that has visible tattoos here, which makes you like the cool therapist.
Yes, I bring a lot of street cred to this counseling center. Tattoos, tattoos are definitely a somatic practice for me, a body-centered practice. I think it's one of the only remaining potential rituals oriented around pain that we still have
Oh, so you're into
in popular culture.
Into BDSM. I didn't know that about you.
I am into the importance of crossing a threshold of discomfort to get what we may need to get.
That, my friends, was a mild way of saying you are correct, but he didn't want to say it in public. Anyway, which brings up
It's good
the
we're
fact-
videoing this so that every time I blush, it will be held in perpetuity.
Well, this would be a good segue into our sponsor for today's session and today's podcast. Today's podcast is sponsored by PleasurePoints.shop, which is where you can go to find and buy items related to BDSM and adult toys in general. PleasurePoints.shop. Hit it up. Go ahead.
I may be wearing some of those underneath
Oh, do
at
tell.
this current moment. I'm not, but I may be. I think that's all I have to say, right? Is this still an intro about me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
I think that's good.
All right. Well, so you're into this mindfulness stuff. So
Yeah.
give us a mindfulness tip of the day.
Sure. Earlier I said just breathe, and then you made fun of me.
I did, because you don't just say, just breathe.
All
That's like telling somebody, just calm down.
Right. Just don't do that thing that's not good for you.
Right.
Stop doing that,
Just breathe.
as Bob Newhart said. Well, how about this? At any moment in your entire existence, you have either been inhaling, exhaling, or paused in between, right?
Yeah.
So we inhale, and then we have a pause, and then we exhale, and we have a pause. If my mind is flooded, or if my system is flooded, and I don't have a whole lot of access to cognition,
Mhm.
then one question I can ask myself is, am I inhaling, exhaling, or in between?
Oh, so you focus on the breaths.
So I focus on the breath, and then that's all I have to do is just breathe.
But what if that doesn't work?
What part of that would not work? Are we holding our breath?
No, like I'm wearing a fucking mask and I smell my breath. Then what?
Then we note that.
Oh, it's just noted.
Yes. And the thoughts are going to drift because that's what the mind is built to do, and likely emotional content is going to come up, which is also rooted in the mind.
Yeah.
And if those things become overwhelming or distracting, then I just breathe.
Just breathe.
When I have some strange spontaneous insight that reminds me, oh right, what I'm supposed to be doing is asking myself if I'm inhaling, exhaling, or in between.
You should get a tattoo of that on your hand. Didn't you tell me to get a tattoo of something on my hand?
I did. I don't remember what it was now, but yeah. We could get matching tattoos.
Oh, wait. No, you couldn't have this matching tattoo. Because do you remember what you messaged me?
You tell it.
Yeah, so apparently I misspelled a word, and Mr. English person over here sent me a message that said, hey, you have a spelling error in your Facebook. Like, who polices Facebook spelling? That is like the epitome of arrogance right there.
It was an ad. It was an ad for one of your upcoming workshops. So it was
Well,
just
don't
trying-
get specific. Anyway, don't get defensive. It's okay. And so I said, oh, I guess I shouldn't post while drinking. And you said, yeah, you should get that tattooed on your hand. I'm like, no, I'm not messing up my fine
Your beauteous
skin
skin. Yes.
to do that. But anyway, okay. So breathe, inhale, exhale, focus on that, and ask yourself, am I inhaling? Am I exhaling?
Or paused in
Or
between.
pause. But you can't pause for very long.
No.
Because you'll die.
Right.
So we don't want
But
that.
even then, your nervous system would eventually take over if we pass out.
Right. So this is a good disclaimer that we're not responsible for any material or advice we give on this show. If you die while breathing or not breathing, that's up to you.
So there is a quick note about the breath, right? One of the only parts of the autonomic nervous system that we have conscious control over.
What?
One of the only parts of our nervous system that we have conscious control over.
No. Autonomic. What is that?
It's a part of our nervous system that is intimately related to our fight or flight response. How about that?
Okay. Auto means it just happens.
Yes, it can happen automatically.
Okay.
Right?
I was just clarifying because you're the English guy and I'm No.
Later, we would talk about sympathetic and parasympathetic and all these different parts of that nervous system,
Oh my God. You're
as
gonna draw me
potential
pictures.
trauma responses.
Okay.
But anyway,
Okay.
since we're staying on the surface here, you could, if I said, let's make our breath fast right now, we could do that. If we wanted to make it shallow or deep or slow or even hold our breath like petulant toddlers till we passed out, we could do that.
Yes.
And then we would forget about that and the breath would continue.
Correct.
Or we would pass out and the breath would take over. Meaning, potentially, the breath is one of the easiest ways or most accessible ways to access both what we have conscious control over and what we do not, our conscious and our unconscious.
Okay. So when those thoughts come in, the strange thoughts, I just do what with them?
Well, it depends on what kind of practice we're doing. Let's say that we're just doing concentrate focus on the breath, right? Then I gently, the same way I would guide a puppy, we don't kick puppies, Larry.
Oh.
We gently redirect the mind
My bad.
back to the breath. Yeah. The kicker about this is, and I think that you probably hear this a lot here, I hear a lot from clients or in other contexts, I'm so bad at meditating, right? Oh, I'm really bad at mindfulness. Because I'm not some Buddha on a mountaintop roaming out, my mind is constantly distracted. And that's like saying, I go to the gym and I do 10 reps of bench presses, and that means I'm really bad at bench presses, right? Because I had to do 10 of them. Like if I just got it all done in one.
You used a dirty word.
Jim?
Jim.
Yeah, I don't like him either. But I am intimately related to him, or know him. Without the rep, without the mind getting distracted, and then hopefully the practice of bringing that mind back to the breath, then what the heck are we doing?
I don't know.
So potentially, here's a redirect. What a blessing that I have such a distracted mind, so I get to so many reps in, I get to practice so much, bringing my mind back to the breath. And perhaps experiencing frustration or annoyance or fidgetiness.
Yeah.
And I get to come back to the breath.
Back to the breath.
That's a long way of saying just breathe.
And this is why he makes the big just breathe. I used to tell my wife, just calm down.
Which works so well.
Oh man.
That makes me calm right down.
She would shake her head and it's like, anyway, so now I tell her, just breathe. She don't like that either. So now I just look at her and say, that sucks. And I walk away.
I tell myself, just breathe.
Just breathe. Just breathe. Just breathe. Well, so let's breathe our way into the topic of the day.
Okay.
And the topic of the day is back to school and parenting. Right?
Are you a parent?
Well, I think I am. I mean, it's debatable. I have 3 people that grew up in my house, none of whom claim me. And so I'm in therapy for that. They're in therapy for other reasons.
That's right, exactly.
Anyway, so it's back to school time, and one of the things we know with going back to school is there's all sorts of anxiety, discomfort, things that are going on. Transitioning back to school is difficult. You got issues in our current school system and related to what teachers and administrators are allowed to say, what they're not allowed to say, what they can do, what they can't do. And then in Gainesville, we have the whole college thing and all of those folks who are coming in. So let's talk a little bit about transitioning back to school.
Okay.
And what would you suggest to parents as they transition their kids back to school and they themselves are having discomfort or their kids are having anxiety about entering into a new setting?
Emphasis on the word transitioning, right? Going from one area, one arena into another. Meaning, it's temporary. Okay, we're going to be back in school soon enough. Or if we're already back in school, excuse me, it's going to feel like old hat soon enough. But we're not there yet. Okay, so if there's anxiety there, if there's racing thoughts there, just breathe in the awareness of, okay, this is temporary, right? And easier said than done in terms of this too shall pass. But It's transitional. We're not going to feel like this for forever. And to me, whether it's tattoos, whether it's crossing the threshold, literal and metaphorical, into a therapist's office, there's a zone of transition. Okay? The kids these days are into liminal spaces, so I hear.
Liminal space.
Liminal. There's a word for you, right?
Yeah.
Liminal, it's a transitory space. It's an in-between space. Yeah. You ever go to the beach?
I try not to.
Okay. Have you ever been there before?
Yes.
Have you ever seen humans sitting on the dunes staring off at the horizon?
No, because there are signs on the dunes that say stay off the dunes.
Good point. All right. How about by the dunes?
At the bottom of the dunes, yes. You have to stay off the dunes.
So a liminal space can be the meeting of two different, seemingly opposing elements, yeah? Like earth and water, sand and the ocean.
Yin and yang.
Oh.
Wow.
Or let's say air and water, like the sky and the ocean, maybe even a little fire in there with the sunset or sunrise. Humans, for
There's a
all of
song
our...
like that, isn't there?
Speaking of ebony and ivory,
Yes.
humans, for all of our distractions, were still really attracted to transitory and liminal spaces. I would suggest lightly that there's something resonant in those areas for us. We go back there. So even as they can be uncomfortable, I don't like this feeling of in-betweenness. It's not, summer break is over and fall hasn't started yet. Kiddos are at home. I really want them to not be at home anymore, but they haven't quite transitioned back into school yet. Or for the students, right? I may be leaving home for the first time, or I have gone back to the safety of home and now I'm headed back into the university setting. It's uncomfortable. It's a time of transition. And yet, in that discomfort, potentially there's something valuable. There's something there to be gained, earned, or learned.
So one of the things that we encounter in the therapy room is, parents who are trying to sometimes protect their kids from experiencing that liminal space, that anxiety producing feeling.
Yes.
Right? And it's almost like for some parents, having their child feeling that discomfort, right, makes them uncomfortable.
Yes.
And they sometimes say to themselves, I've got to fix this.
I want to rescue you.
Right. So how could parents be with the child and walk through that experience with their child without overstepping and saving a child that probably doesn't need to be saved in that moment, but needs to know A, B, C, and D, and I'm here with you?
Yeah.
How can we help parents with that?
I think there's a cognitive approach that's about, again, this idea of, I know I have to let the fledgling bird leave the nest, right? I know that I have to get out of the way on some level. And I think that can provide some context, and you go, that's right. Then I think there's an emotional content to it about this is difficult, right? Especially if we're talking about young adulthood and adolescence, parents learning, AKA a practice, not something that comes automatically, that I start to share my own discomfort. I'm really sad that you're going to be leaving. I find myself grieving the fact that you're going to go. You're not going to be living in this household anymore, in the case of the university, right? My son started kindergarten in the midst of COVID, and I will, for the rest of my days, carry the image of him in his too big school uniform with his mask on, getting ready to enter kindergarten for the first time, and we couldn't get out of the car to walk him. And how much ugly crying I did and my co-parent did at that time. It was brutal, and I wouldn't want to do that. Didn't like it. And it was appropriate, and it was what needed to happen. And he was super scared, and he looked like a little infant getting ready to go. And he was 6 years old, and it was time to go to kindergarten. 5 years old, whatever he was, young. And he went and did it, and he was successful at it. He gained resilience. We gained resilience. We learned experientially instead of conceptually, this was good for him and developmentally appropriate. It doesn't mean it was any less uncomfortable for me or him. So whether they're 8 or 18, there are these developmental milestones where we go, this is going to suck probably. But at 18, I get to say to my 18-year-old, when they are 18, right? This sucks. I don't want to do this. I don't like this as a parent, right?
Right.
And they may go, shut up, Dad, I can't wait to go, I'm having a blast. Or, yeah, I'm scared too. Oh, and I'm allowed to admit that to you? Yeah. There's a new level of vulnerability and trust potentially there that leads to a more resilient young adult.
I think one of the difficult transitions for adolescents in particular is moving from middle to high.
Yeah.
Right? Oof. You've gone from being the top dog in 8th grade to being the newbie,
the frosh.
And even in college, right? A lot of these kids, especially at UF, they're used to being, top of the line and very
high achieving.
Yeah, high achieving. They stand out in their schools, all that stuff, and then they come here and they're like just 1 in a million. Right?
We have quite a few clients like that. Yes.
Yeah. And so that transition can be difficult as well. So for college students, as they move into their freshman year, how could they kind of attend to that reality that they're just one of 60,000 as opposed to being one of 400 maybe, and then the difficulties they face with being homesick, even though they don't like to say they're homesick,
right.
And sometimes not knowing how to manage like the daily life.
Yeah.
Like now they have to manage their bank accounts. Sometimes they have to deal with their own transportation issues, setting up medical appointments, mental health appointments, all that stuff, right? And so at times it can become overwhelming for them. So for a freshman coming into UF or somebody coming into that area, what are some tips you can give them to say, handle it?
The first thing that comes up for me is you're gonna make mistakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So much of the appropriate anxiety is us trying to avoid the mistakes. Mm-hmm. I want to get this right, particularly for folks used to being high achieving, being the cream of the crop, being special, right? Maybe we'll even call this gifted kid syndrome for a lot of the students coming into UF. They are risk averse and mistake averse. Mm-hmm. And yet, non-negotiably, I believe, or let's say it's a belief I have that I didn't come up with or invent, that mistakes are the most efficient way to learn, mm-hmm. right? I get clarity about, I don't want to do that again.
Right. It's okay to make mistakes.
I have sufficient motivation to change, mm-hmm. right? To enact behavioral change. That didn't work.
Right.
The overdraft fees when I forgot to look at my checking account negatively impacted me. If I am sufficiently open to that, I'm going to go, I'm not going to let that happen again. Mm-hmm. So I want to go out with everybody for the 7:00 movie, but I said I was going to stay home and I need to do my budget.
Right.
Maybe I get to go to the movie, but then tomorrow morning I'm missing brunch because I got to do it at some point. And whatever all those negotiations are, mistakes are going to happen, mm-hmm. right? Do I have enough acceptance of that? Self-forgiveness, knowing I'm going to stumble. There's vulnerability in that. The other thing that comes up for me is peer support. Can you share with your friends how terrified you might be to make a mistake or a mistake that might have happened? Can you be a listening ear for your friends when they're making mistakes, right? And I think that there's a huge spectrum there. It depends on previously established relationships, how quickly you're making new friendships, but I think that the peer experience cannot be overemphasized, particularly at that age.
Right. That connectional piece.
The connection piece, the mm-hmm. relational piece. Way back when, whatever the heck that means, we would do rites of passage. We would have initiations. We would take people and steward them from adolescence into young adulthood or from childhood into adolescence. And we have maybe a couple things that we still do that way, and some organizations set up that way. Fraternities and sororities would be one,
right?
But not limited to that.
Right.
But there's various organizations hopefully set up to say, we're going to do this together as a group. And while I still have to have my own individual experience in that, I'm handling it, I'm connected in a collective sense, in a relational sense.
And I think sometimes UF thinks they're doing that, right? Like they have these, I forget what they call these classes, these courses, but it's basically about creating space where kids can explore a particular topic, but the whole goal of it really is to build some sort of camaraderie. my experience with the students is that they don't see it that way, right? And they're very individual nature at times.
Yes.
And so they come into this place and it's like they live on their own islands, right? And so what are the what problems could arise if I choose to stay on my own island, be isolated? Potentially, what are some mental health issues, some challenges, relational issues that can arise as a result of that?
Yeah. Depression is, of course, the first one that comes up, right? I think isolation and feeling exiled are very common experiences or clues into possible depression being there. I also think that, I think we talk a lot about depression and anxiety being intimately linked,
Sure.
Or maybe not two sides of the same coin, but certainly different pages in the same book. They're siblings, very close siblings, twins even.
Right. But sometimes it's hard to differentiate between the two.
Exactly.
Right? And sometimes they literally do coexist.
Yeah.
And they feed off of each other.
So I think feelings of isolation, we would more maybe like commonly or even anecdotally say, oh yeah, that's a depressive symptom, or that's how it is when I feel depressed.
Mm-hmm.
But the anxiety comes up too in the sense of us being potentially oriented towards safety in the herd, safety in the collective, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's everyone doing around me? And provided that no one is giving alarm signals right next to me, I can go, okay, I'm relatively safe.
You know there's nobody over there, right?
We're talking conceptually.
Oh, conceptually, because you looked and I was like, oh, Jesus, is he going off?
My ancestors are here. And so if I don't have that connection, if I don't have that metaphorically, shoulder to shoulder connection, I'm less oriented towards safety, right? All of a sudden, I'm that much more out there on an island, feeling potentially like a target, potentially more vulnerable.
But isn't that a byproduct of how society kind of pushes us to raise our kids to be strong, to be independent,
resilient,
right?
Yes.
And Shanae, when she was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, highlighted the fact that teaching African American kids to be resilient is not a positive. And the flip side of that is for many of us Caucasian folks, we push that.
Yeah.
We push it. And we teach our kids through that process that, the underlying message is you need to be responsible for everything.
Yeah.
Right? And so they come into this carrying a lot of weight on their shoulders. And then they enter this new environment, and sometimes it doesn't go well.
That's right.
And it may be the first time they have ever failed at something, or feel like they failed, because my God,
Right.
I mean, they get a B and they failed. I'm like, bitch, please, I barely got out of college. Like, I was waiting for my diploma, right? Like, graduation day.
Yeah.
I didn't know if I had the GPA to get through graduation. And so I have to monitor myself when they come in and they say, Larry, I got a B. I know you'll find this hard. I breathe. And I remind myself, I never had a B in my life.
B sound nice.
B sounds nice.
I agree with that, and I do think that there's an unrealistic standards toward what success looks like or what achievement looks like. Mm-hmm. I also think, having been a few decades removed from the collegiate experience,
why are you pointing at me?
I pointed at both of us.
Well, point at yourself.
We're
I'm still there.
We're old men here.
Oh, I hate you.
And the scholastic requirements, the scholarship requirements, the merit requirements, right? The impact of getting a 3.0 versus a 4.0 does sometimes carry more pragmatic consequences than what I was used to.
It's monetized.
It's exactly. And I have to consciously remind myself of that too, right? That the game has changed in terms of the obligation and the responsibilities that students do.
Well, kids can't be kids these days, right? Mm-hmm. So they start very early on.
Right. If I've been in dual enrollment since 9th grade, right? I'm coming in as a junior at 18. It's a different ballgame.
Right. But even beyond that, I mean, in order to apply for colleges, right? What do they want to know? They want to know, like, not only your GPA, they want to know what groups you were involved in. They want to know how much service you did in the community. Mm-hmm. They want you well-rounded. But the byproduct of that is an overscheduled high schooler.
Yeah.
who has no time to do your effing breathe because they have so much going on in their life, right? That they don't have an opportunity to just breathe.
Yeah.
And so then they come into this setting all alone. Mom and dad aren't there to schedule.
Yeah.
Although if you listen to the professors, mom and dad are still calling the schedule, right?
Sometimes here too.
Anyway, so, but yes, I think we over-program our kids.
Some of it strikes me, I go back to this idea of what is developmentally appropriate. And there's this idea of, this comes up more in mentorship and some at-risk youth activities that I've been involved in, but the fire of youth, right? The job of someone to be 18, 19, 20, in their early 20s, maybe even mid to late 20s now, is to hold the fire of youth, right? Is to be fiery, to be full of energy, to go, I didn't go to bed till 2 a.m. last night, and I knew I had an exam at 7 a.m. this morning, but I'm young, dumb, and full of things that keep me awake, keep me able to do that. It is appropriate to that experience to just have a bit of an excess of fire, an excess of fuel. And you can get away with that for a while, right? Until you burn out, until there ain't no fuel left, until you go, oh, what I'm burning isn't clean, long-lasting fuel anyway, because I'm 18 or I'm 25 or whatever it is. I don't care about sustainability. I don't care about running the marathon. I'm built for sprints.
Right.
Ideally,
I think in sprints. I think in sprints.
That's right. Ideally, that's where the elder energy comes in to go, hey, that's cool, you're super fiery. We want to make sure you're not burning down the entire village. And so some good elder energy helps have a container and say the youth is doing what they're doing appropriately, but we're going to make sure that they don't burn themselves out.
Right.
Is there much youth and elder, authentic youth and elder interaction happening at these time periods? I would argue no. Right? We got a lot of olders, but we don't have a lot of elders.
Right.
Not to put UF too much into the the crossfire or the sights here, but are there elders that are able to step in, right? If you have a certain professor mindset with tenure in mind, can you go in and temper a youth's fire appropriately, right? Or you go like, I can't risk it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Can't be in the crossfire.
Well, that's a topic for another day.
We'll do a part 2 on that.
Well, I don't know. That depends. I mean, if they want to sponsor us, I won't do it at all. I mean, I'm gonna sell out for money. I mean, it'll only cost like $100,000 to sponsor.
Speaking to the mic, yeah.
I already did. Great there. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, there's lots going on, and then as kids transition, we use that word transition, but there's also a different connotation to transition, which is transitioning in your understanding of your own gender and sexual orientation and what that means, right? And so we're experiencing now some real anxiety and fears from parents of kids who identify as lesbian, gay, trans, bi, gay, going into the public school system with this bullshit bill, right? Like, we call it the Don't Say Gay bill, and then, DeSatan will say, that's not in there. Well, no, it's not in there, but it's implied, right? And so they're anyway. That's a whole political thing that I'm not going to go through today. I'll save that for part 2 because I know DeSatan will never sponsor this program.
We don't have to worry.
We talk about sex,
right?
And we're okay with sex. Anyway, so we've got this issue now with kids who are truly afraid of what their experience is going to be like back in the public school system, because they identify as LGBTQIA+. So for that population, how can we best help them?
Yeah. I don't want to be too doom and gloom about it, but it does feel necessary or appropriate to say that fear doesn't come out of nowhere.
Correct. I agree.
This is different than maybe some of the we could talk about cognitive distortions, or we could talk about things produced by the state of anxiety.
Right.
So I feel like
no, it's very true. It's very true.
I think we're in mutual agreement about it is scary for a reason.
Yeah.
As a parent, it scares the shit out of me. I'm a product of the public school system. Both my parents were public school teachers. I have extended family involved in the public school system. It was a place that always felt reasonably, I don't know if safe is the right word, but a place that you could go to.
Yeah.
You could just be. And I think,
and you knew which teachers you could trust, which ones can't.
You could navigate
right.
it.
But even the teachers now don't know what the hell they're supposed to do, right?
So I hope that doesn't come off as hopeless, but I think you have to start the conversation by saying, yeah, this is real, and the danger and the threat is real.
We recognize that it is real, and it normalizes that reaction, but it highlights the fact that potentially the first thing needs to be, how do you maintain safety for yourself? How do you determine who is safe to come out to, who is safe to be around, who is safe to disclose to within the school setting, and even in society as a whole, right? And so it's a challenge, but the anxiety is there.
Yeah.
And not just with the kids, but with the parents as well.
And as you said, the teachers and the staff and the admin and the people that seem to be trapped in this idea of, I have to enforce this, but we all have to make our own way through it too.
Yeah.
And
well, we already have evidence of schools here in Alachua County which have removed certain books and images, from the school or from the classroom. Yeah. So we used to be able to say, well, Alachua County's pretty safe.
Be in a bubble. Yeah.
Apparently our bubble is burst.
Yeah.
Right. So dealing with that anxiety is something I think we're going to have to continue to struggle with.
Yeah.
Right. And how, being able to walk with somebody through that anxiousness is difficult. And so for parents particularly, if you say, just do this one thing, well, even though there's not just one thing to do, but if they need one tool to do nothing else, what is that they can do?
Painting with a broad brush here, because I think that the more nuanced parts of this are what is age appropriate, what is developmentally appropriate. But my just breathe equivalent of this is witness it, right?
What does that mean?
It means I have to be there for it. It means that I cannot fix it right off the bat.
Right.
I cannot change this, right? I have to trust my child or whoever it is that I'm caretaking to have their own experience of this. And that should be terrifying, because it is terrifying, right? Again, that threat is real, both existential and kind of pragmatic and practical with what we're talking about right now. You can't be there every second.
Right.
And you can have those same fears about, how dirty the monkey bars are or something at the VPK school. This is a more actualized threat, and yet what you do in response to it, I believe, is similar. Right? How do I show up and say, you're not going to be alone in this, but also not pretend that I can be in the classroom with them or that I can fix this for you?
Right.
Francis Weller is one of my big touchstones therapeutically. He would say this more in relationship to grief work, but I think it's applicable to what we're talking about here. What he says is, the work to be done, it's the solitary work that can't be done alone. And let me unpack that for a second, because I think there's something beautiful here that applies to a lot of what we've been talking about. Solitary work in the sense that I can't do this for you, right? My child or that person that I'm concerned about is going to have their own experience. I cannot change it. I cannot get in the way of it. And there's something potentially deeply terrifying about that. I can also say, although I can't do the work for you, I can't lift that weight, you won't be alone.
Right.
You actually need to do that in community. And so when I say, damn it, I won't leave you, of course I am going to drop you off at school. I'm not going to sit next to you in the classroom. But when you come home, I'm there.
Right.
When your fears and your anxieties are there, I need non-negotiably to be there for them and hold them and say, I understand that that's really difficult. We can get into pragmatic problem solving. It doesn't mean that we have to keep it just floaty.
Right.
But I have to be there for you and also let you have the experience.
Right. And sometimes focusing on the things that you can control in that environment and the things that you can't control are helpful. Teaching kids to advocate for themselves, not just at school, but within the community.
Yeah.
Right. Like, how do you advocate that, I'm gay, lesbian, bi, trans, whatever, and I am who I am,
Yeah.
whether you like it or not. Right?
Yeah.
It gives that child a sense of pride, strength, resilience, maybe, but it also helps them to find ways to address the potential future of what's going to happen by advocating for themselves, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like what I tell parents sometimes is, if you show them the path and you walk with them on that path and the steps on the path, it's like a map. Help them draw a map of this is what I need right now. How do I get there?
Yeah.
Right. So if I need safety, what are the steps I have to take to get there?
Right.
Because safety is a big word and it's very vague. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
And every child's going to define it differently.
And there's this tension here. I'm really feeling an appropriate tension, the type of tension that keeps a bridge from collapsing or something between the individual and the community, right? This person has to have their own experience. If there's commonalities and shared experience, of course that community is very, very important.
Sure.
And I have to find my own way through that.
Yeah.
Right? And the family is a community that the child as an individual is emerging from.
Sure.
The school is a community. The identity is a community. The city is a community. And I have to find my own way through that.
Right.
So hopefully there's a roadmap. Hopefully there are, common points along the way that we can point to, and then I can't walk it for you. Right?
But that's why I think you have to help them craft that map.
Yeah.
Right? Because part of it's going to be learning how to navigate it, and I can tell you how to navigate it, but adolescents are going to look at you and say, "Screw you, you're old." Right?
What do you know about my experience?
Right. And that's what they're supposed to do, right? They're supposed to
Appropriate. Yes.
Right. They're supposed to kind of reject and be independent appropriately. So, for parents, I'll often say, ask questions. Don't give them statements. Don't say, do this, do this, do this.
Do you have an example of that?
Yeah, so you can ask a kid, like, if a kid comes to you and says, I'm really struggling with this. Okay, well, tell me, what have you tried to solve that problem? How have you tried to address that problem?
Yeah.
And what do you think you might try that you haven't tried? Right? And as a parent, you've got ideas in your mind,
Sure.
right? But if you come out with that solution, it doesn't allow that child to struggle with coming up with their own solution which fits them, right? And it's a much lengthier process and much more difficult process, but the end result is that it potentially allows that child to feel that sense of control and empowerment to say, I have developed this plan, I feel secure in this plan, I will enact this plan, and then the parent says, well, what do you need from me? How can I help
How can
you?
I support that?
Right? And then you go.
Yeah.
And when that plan doesn't work perfectly, okay, how do we need to adjust?
You're also not alone in that.
Right.
Yeah, the empowerment there, the idea of trusting in their own autonomy too, right? You are going to lead me through this. Yes, I have my own assumptions about what would be a good idea and a bad idea here, but leading with, what do you think? Right. How are you planning to do this?
Absolutely.
Displays, I think, a huge level of trust. I think that comes up in couples counseling, right? I think that comes up in individual counseling, like defaulting on a level of trust towards someone else's experience. I think whether an 18-year-old can verbally express that that's what's happening to them or not is still potentially received and says more than, hey honey, we're gonna do this together.
Right.
Or, hey, let's do a pros and cons list here.
Right. It doesn't mean you're saying to the kid, fix it yourself.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Which I think sometimes parents feel like that's what they're doing, but in reality, what you're doing is you're helping them to use their higher thinking skills, their problem solving skills, their conflict resolution skills, and if they don't have them, you're helping them to develop their own process, while at the same time helping them to do some self-soothing, some fucking breathing, just breathe, right? And being able to control that emotional reaction, because I think for youth in particular, it's that initial emotional reaction that they're uncomfortable with or they don't know what to deal with, right? And so they'll act on that emotion. Right. Well, adults do this too. I don't. I have no emotions. But they act on that emotion rather than sitting there and just saying, okay, I'm having this emotion. Where did it come from? why is it here? What is it trying to say to me? And what does it need from me, right? So internal family systems, really, right? In order to feel better.
Right. That's that quick spark of that fire, right? Is quick reactivity. Oh, I have an emotion, and it's either positive or negative. I either want to keep it or I
usually
want to
gas. I'm usually having acid reflux when I do that, but, which happens a lot, by the way. But I have a pill for that. And anyway, so which is a nice kind of a segue to a couple of things. So like local resources also is helpful. So I also work with an organization called Transcending Adolescence. Fantastic organization. You can Google them, transcendingadolescence.org, and they provide a 1-week camping experience for trans adolescents. And the first event was this past summer, and the anxiety from the kids was high.
Palpable.
It was high. But the end result of the experience of being in community with other trans kids was powerful and life-changing for them. So that's a good organization that you can hook up to.
I just call that a rite of passage, by the way. Pulling someone out of their normal environment, often putting them into nature as a community, and then asking them to have their own experience through that and be witnessed in that.
And they couldn't use their cell phones. Panic ensued.
Sure.
Mostly from the parents. The parents were just like, "Oh, I won't be able to reach my child."
Check in.
And I'm like, you're going to be thankful for that one day, right? Like you're going to not want to hear from your kid one day, right? And that's okay too. Anyway, so that's one. Locally, you've got the Pride Center, and you have at UF, you have the LGBTQIA Resource Center on site. Here at our center, we're very fortunate to have Nate and Brandy, and they are developing group programs specifically for trans adolescents and trans students at UF. It will probably expand that into the whole alphabet. Probably call it alphabet soup. And there's also communities within Gainesville, religious communities within Gainesville that are very open, very supporting, very affirming for kids who have faith and who believe in faith and want to go to church. So tapping into those local resources is very important. So that's important. So let's move on to some question and answers. You up for some questions and answers?
I am.
Yeah. So if you are interested in sending us questions, you can send them to office@GainesvilleCounselingCenter.com. Office, OFFICE, at GainesvilleCounselingCenter.com, and we will answer those hopefully correctly. Another disclaimer. The answers we provide are ours and ours alone and do not belong to Gainesville Community Counseling Center, its directors, or its organizational status. The answers are solely ours.
For entertainment purposes only.
Entertainment. I don't think these are entertaining, but we'll see. Are there any sex
questions? It is for us.
Yeah. Any sex questions?
There are some relationship type questions. So these are all pulled from the one and the only Reddit.
I wonder, but they can't see her.
Okay.
Right? Like, so they must think this is a ghost. This is your ancestors.
She's
this is his ancestors. Yeah. He has metaphorically brought his ancestors to life.
I am the podcast ghost.
Voice from beyond.
That's what I do.
Okay.
But no, so these are all pulled from Reddit. They are all pulled from a subthread specifically for teens. And these are some of the advice type things that they have posted.
What the hell is a subreddit?
A subreddit?
Subreddit.
What?
Off of the main category.
Just go with it, Larry.
Yeah. You're too
I'll
old.
notice that.
You're too old.
You'll get it.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
just note that.
Do we have a Reddit?
No, we don't have a Reddit.
Should we get a Reddit?
Stay on point.
I have ADHD.
Yes. So since we were just sort of kind of talking about this one is entitled, How Do I Explain to My Parents Why I'm LGBTQ+? And so she said, so my parents aren't homophobic or anything. It's just when I try to come out to them as a lesbian, they ask for a good reason. And I tell them that I just don't know and I can't change it. But they dismiss it and say that I'll change my mind in a week's time because I'm very indecisive. But at the same time, this feels like something that won't change.
That is so dismissive. Oh.
And she just doesn't know how to get them to understand.
So I would look at my parents and say, why are you straight?
Give me a good reason why you're straight.
Why are you straight?
What came up for me too.
Yeah, like I just want to. I'm having a visceral reaction to that, and I want to lay my hands, on these parents. Like, I hear her say they're not homophobic, but then I hear that question, I'm like, there's a tinge of homophobia in there, or they're scared. I don't know, but why? There's no why to answer. It's I have come to understand this about myself, and while I realize it may be a foreign concept to you, just like you didn't choose to be straight, or maybe you did. Maybe Dad's on the down low, right? Or maybe you have ignored that part of yourself. I don't know, but you didn't choose. I mean, you chose to have sex and create me, but you didn't choose to be straight. You just are. And that's what it's like for me.
I think it's an unavoidable generational gap here. Right?
No, don't let the parents off.
I don't mean that in terms of letting them off the hook. What I'm trying to say is the norm previously established by being so cis-het is that...
You're so hip.
That's the limit of it. That's as far as it goes. And I have to say it a lot about myself and my own identity. It is, since that was such the default, and while that may continue to be a level of default, right? It is new and scary for the parents. This is different than an excuse, but it's going to come up a lot more considering how more out in the open these identities are. Mm-hmm. It's going to be different than a lot of parents, not all parents, right? We also now have, thank God, better examples or more out examples of parents who
it could be maybe
more diverse sets of parentage. Point being that to me, it highlights how scary it can be for parent and child when you realize, like, we do not share the same experiences. I'm going to have an identity that has built-in difficulties in it, socially and individually, that my parents cannot relate to. They can relate to overcoming discomfort. They may be able to relate to different levels of oppression, depending on what the parental identities are, but they can't relate to this part in this example, right? How do you overcome that chasm? What do you do about that? I mean, I think
rebel.
Well, and there is a level of subversion here that came up for me earlier. I was like, I think we have a bunch of rebellious spirits here in the room, but there's something really good to the tension about that, and I don't want to use that as an excuse for can be a very painful situation, right? But
I would highlight the fact that if I were this person, this individual, and I were individuated enough to challenge my parents in a healthy manner.
Yes.
Right? I would use Gottman. I would say, when I hear the word why, what that says to me is you think I'm flawed. You think there's something wrong with me. And then when I combine that with things like, oh, you're just going to change in a week, it feels very dismissive.
Yeah.
What would be helpful for me is if you would say, we accept you just as you are. That's it. But there is no answer to why. Maybe what the parents are trying to figure out is, how did you come to understand that?
Right.
And it comes out as why.
Right.
I'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that one. Stupid ass question, why? Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
All right, this next one's a one-liner, but I'm really interested for your responses on this one. All it says is it normal to stalk your ex after a breakup?
Nate?
Is it normal? It may be distressingly normal. I don't know if it's okay, but
Well,
it may be
how do you
normal.
define stalking? I mean, are you talking like the Facebook scrolling or Instagram scrolling?
Obsessive thoughts
right?
right.
Or are you talking actual stalking, like legal definition of stalking? Because that shit ain't normal. No, right? Is it normal to have thoughts of your ex and to go through their social media? And I suspect that's what they mean, stalking in that capacity. But is it normal? What is normal? How do you define that? Is it healthy? I think is a better question.
Right.
And for me, the answer is probably not. Right? And the reason it's not healthy is because there's a reason you're exes in most cases, right? And so why are you going to be triggered by the constant reminder of that person? Why are you going to do that to yourself? Right? So just as hard as it is, and I tell college students this all the time, delete, 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 delete. Unfriend, block, whatever, right? And the phone, take them out of your phone, do all that. Not that it's a bad thing, but because it is a trigger for you every time you encounter that thing.
Right. The chances of you being stuck,
Right.
as opposed to allowing this heartbreak to move through you and actually learn something from it. I don't know if it's directly proportional, but it's certainly related.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Last one. We'll end on a heartfelt one.
Oh, no.
We'll end on a heartfelt one.
I got this
So-
one because you don't have emotions.
Yeah.
I don't have
This
emotions
one's
or
for
big
Connor.
words. I'm in my liminal space.
So this
Just
one's
breathing.
entitled "How to Be a Good Shoulder to Cry On Over Text or in Person."
Ooh.
Let's say that again.
How to be a good shoulder to cry on in text or over. Wait. In person or over text. There we go. I switched it. So they said, a lot of people have started to come to me when they need someone to comfort them, but I don't know how to do that. I'm extremely empathetic. I feel for and with them, but I can't put how sorry I am for them into words. I automatically go straight to trying to figure out how to fix the problem.
Oh, this must be a guy.
This tends to cause them to feel even worse, for obvious reasons.
Especially if they're female.
But I don't know what to say or do to try to help them feel better. Up until very recently, every time a person comes to me with a problem, they want me to try and help them fix it, but no one has wanted me to comfort them. It's uncharted territory. And then when they're upset that I don't know how to be a shoulder to cry on, I feel so bad because I want to make them feel better. I just don't know how.
You said you were going to take it.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about the difference between being empathetic and an empath.
Yeah, because I get the impression they're an empath, right? which is a whole other thing. Yeah, so an empath, right, is someone who I say ingests, right? You absorb the other person's emotions rather than just be with them.
I have to feel what you feel. Your
I have
emotions
to
are
feel it. I
contagious.
have to feel it, and if I don't feel it, then there's something wrong with me. Well, no, that's not an accurate rendition and definition of empathy. So at the root of what this person is asking is, how do I be with somebody and be with them in that experience, not solve the problem, but just let them know that what they're experiencing is valid, right? That they're not crazy. So my response would be that if you look on the Google machine for how to be an active listener, how to be a good listener, I forget the title of it, by John and Julie Gottman. Surprise. There's an explanation of how to do this, and that is that when that person is speaking, your job as the listener is to receive the information, repeat it back to them. So it sounds to me like what you're saying is this. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. well, if that's what my experience was, if that's what I heard, if that's what I saw, if that's what I thought, it makes sense to me that you would feel this way, that you would think this about that you would have this emotional reaction. That makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
Like, what is it you need from me right now? Right? And oftentimes the answer is, I don't know what I need. Okay. Well, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
Right? And when you do know what you need, will you tell me?
Yeah.
Because oftentimes when they're emoting, I do know that big word. When they're emoting, they just want to know that they're being heard, understood, and validated. Right? Now the comment about trying to fix things, and I made that very sexist, must be a guy, right? Because guys go into fix it mode.
Tend to.
Yes, we do, right? Because typically we don't have emotions. We don't know what those emotions are. We don't have words for them, right? And so when our significant other comes to us, our natural reaction is emotion, push it away, solve problem, I don't have to deal with the emotion, right? So just sitting with the emotion means I hear you, I understand you, it makes sense that you have that emotion, right? But you don't have to allow that emotion to guide you to doing something harmful or hurtful or bad.
Yeah, what comes up for me is the inherent vulnerability of sharing what's usually a negative or uncomfortable emotion, right? The validation says, right, if I'm hearing you correctly, I'm reflecting back to you, this is what I'm hearing you say, and then I go, yeah, that makes sense to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you're experiencing sounds pretty congruent to what you're describing. There's such relief in that, right? There's such potential. It doesn't fix anything, right, but it goes, oh, I'm not aberrant here, right? I can, this has a certain, it doesn't necessarily have to be logical, but it's coherent.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense from the outside.
Right.
The end part sticks out to me too, in the sense of someone comes to me with this and then I can't fix it and I feel terrible. Right. Except that it's not actually about you. Right? Your discomfort at not being able to relieve somebody else's discomfort, which comes up in men's issues quite a bit, it's not about you, dum-dum, right? Being able to sit there, stand there, witness whatever it is that someone else is going through and be like, yep, that's strong, if you want to use a typically masculine descriptor about things that are good, right? I'm strong, I'm resilient, I can lift a boulder over my head, right? Whatever the version is of like, I don't have to actually fix this, I can just be in this with you.
Right. It's not my responsibility to fix it.
Which also means having enough boundaries or feeling an appropriate amount of discerning between what's mine and what's yours to go like, that's right, I don't actually have to fix this because it's not my pain. Right. I resonate with it, I may have my own reaction to it, which may or may not be emotionally intense for me, but yeah, that's what's happening right now.
And sometimes just saying, wow, that's a lot. I don't have words for that.
Right.
But I'm here for you.
Yeah.
Just dump it and go.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is knowing when to say I can't deal with that and drawing that boundary is also essential. Right? Like just because somebody comes to you and wants to vent or to share that doesn't mean that you have to accept it, right? Like if you're not in a space where you can do that, it's okay to say, I really want to be there for you, but right now I'm having this issue and I can't do it. Do you have somebody else that you can talk to? Right? So you're not telling them, get away. You're saying, I can't do it right now.
What if my people-pleasing tendencies get in the way?
Then you call 352-448-9120 or go to www.gainesvillecounselingcenter.com, schedule an appointment with Conor because he'll fix you.
Yes.
Right.
I can fix you.
Okay. Well, that brings us to an end to this episode of, drumroll please. That's much better this time. Welcome to the new you. As we end, I want to highlight some things that are going on here at the center and invite you to take a look at them. We have groups which are starting up, art therapy group which starts in September, a anger management group. Sorry, I'm 52 and I have these moments. Which also starts in September. We have the 7 principles for making marriage work. Sign up for that now. On September 24th, led by moi, and I'll be assisted by some other folks as well. We have a porn addiction group. Well, it's not for porn addiction to promote it, it's to overcome it, right? And that's a bad word to go with porn addiction, right? Overcome it. To struggle with recovery related to porn and sex addiction. That'll be on Monday evenings, in person, please. And then the newest one that's under development, apparently the name that I have been referring to it by has won. This is how bad therapists are in Gainesville, right? So I have been referring to this group affectionately as how not to be an asshole in a relationship. And it's for young men who are in relationships and who might be struggling with issues such as communication, problem solving, gender roles, sexuality, imbalances in sexuality. And so I put the name out into our therapist Facebook group, and you probably
I voted.
You voted for it too, didn't you?
I did.
You asshole. And so
See, it fits.
anyway, and I fully expected them, right? Because therapists tend to be touchy-feely, and
Yes.
we can't do that, right? And so I put that out there, and then a couple other suggestions, and then they made some suggestions, and no, these people voted for how not to be an asshole in a relationship. So if nobody signs up for it, I'm blaming all the therapists in Gainesville, including you, for voting for it. But it'll start in September, so welcome to that. Any closing thoughts for you?
No.
He's useless as tits on a warthog. Thank you for being here for our third episode of Welcome to the New You. Check us out on Spotify, on YouTube, and on the intro tubes at www.GainesvilleCounselingCenter.com.